On here today. Very excited about this next panel, how AI is making hardware sexy again. And it's such an interesting time. We heard this morning from Ivo Bolson, the CTO of Xilinx, about the advent of AI. And it was really interesting hearing his perspective this morning when he was talking about, initially doing his PhD in AI back in Belgium years ago when he was working for IMEC. And then the whole of the AI sector kind of, to his view, really fell out of popularity, right? It just kind of went down and died and kind of went into nothing, in part because, from the panel that we just saw before, the infrastructure wasn't really there to support it, the data sets weren't there, the sensors weren't there, and according to Ivo, we really saw a resurgence of AI starting at about 2012. And so I think it's really interesting where we're at today, because you can't go to any kind of tech conference without hearing people talk about AI, machine learning, deep learning. And obviously here at Hardwarecon, we're looking at this. There are a number of companies like Xilinx that have kind of taken a lead in this advent, this resurgence of AI, and the concept of which has been around for 50 or 60 years. But one of those companies is NVIDIA. NVIDIA has really kind of been moving the needle with AI and its importance and its position in the world. And here today to lead our panel on AI is making hardware sexy again is a friend of mine who I've known for a number of years, who also is the host of the NVIDIA AI podcast, Noah Kravitz.
Thanks, Beth. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Yeah, clap for the panel. Clap for AI. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. And keep your fingers crossed as we start. Our third panelist is en route from San Francisco, which means he could roll in any second, or he might get here tomorrow. We don't know. Yeah, so as Beth said, and thank you, Beth. My name is Noah Kravitz. I am a recovering journalist, blogger. I now make my living mostly developing content, writing, podcasting, other things for a number of companies. And as Beth said, one of my gigs, probably my favorite thing I'm doing right now, is hosting the AI podcast for NVIDIA. I covered consumer tech and mobile tech in particular for a number of years, kind of charted the smartphone explosion starting in the pre-iPhone days. And with no disrespect to the telecom industry, I ran into an old telecom friend this morning. Phones kind of got boring after the first iPhone came out a couple of years after that, and suddenly the hardware, at least, was all glass slabs. So the notion of AI making hardware sexy again is something I'm pretty psyched about, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the hardware world, just maybe not on the iPhone consumer level. But that's why we're here, because the next piece of hardware that's going to capture the imagination is in this building somewhere, I'm sure. The podcast itself, I'll do a quick plug. It's called the NVIDIA AI Podcast. You can get it on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Also on the NVIDIA blog, there's a homepage for the podcast. And essentially what we do is we talk to people who are doing cool things with AI. And so there's a range of folks from people who've been in deep learning for the past couple of decades to software developers who taught themselves some AI on the side and stumbled into doing something really cool. We had a guy on a couple months ago who built an AI model that was restoring old photos and colorizing them, and it kind of went viral, and he was awesome to talk to. I've gotten the chance in the past year or so since I've been doing it to talk to some people doing some really cool stuff with hardware married to AI. Ray and I were speaking just before this about a company in the UK who is essentially building what I think of as a USB port for the human body. They're tapping into the central nervous system. They've trained AI models to try to take all the electrical noise coming from the human body nervous system and translate it into some kind of machine language that can be used to communicate with peripherals, and in this case, prosthetics and other kind of next-gen bio-augmentation devices. And AI is kind of, decoding the code and turning it into language that these things can communicate with. I talked to somebody one of these on-the-side DIY guys who built a Lego sorting robot using machine language and trained the AI models to differentiate between sizes and configurations and colors of the Lego bricks. So there's all kinds of cool stuff going on, and AI has become democratized enough that you don't need to be an academic in a research lab to use it. So it's super cool. It's an exciting time. Today we've got a great panel, 2/3 of which are here, and again, the other third may or may not roll in, so keep an eye out for Lucas. We're going to talk about how AI has been and is revolutionizing how we design, how we use, and how we think about hardware. So we'll have a discussion, and then we've got some time at the end to open it up to questions from all of you. So again, thanks for being here. Let's meet our panelists. Danielle Swank is CEO and partner at Forbes AI. And Ray Chaudhuri is newly installed as the VP of Strategy at Lexi. So why don't we start? You can introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about who you are, what you do. Ray, in your case, if you want to talk about what you were doing up until 2 weeks ago, that counts too. Danielle, why don't you start?
Yeah, hi, I'm Danielle. I'm the founder of Forbes AI. We're a machine learning research lab based in San Francisco. We work a little bit differently than a normal research lab in that we partner with companies to work long-term on advancing their AI and keeping them right at the very cutting edge of what's possible.
And I'm Ray Chaudhuri. As of 2 weeks ago, I was at a company called Zymergen, which is a healthcare AI company making products, pharmaceutical, chemical, and other industrial products in microbial systems like bacteria and yeast. And my background is I've been involved with various startups, advise a lot of startups, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. So let's kind of look at the title of our discussion here, how is AI making hardware sexy again? And I'm going to throw this to you to start, Danielle. How is, you work with a bunch of different clients and across different industries and with different ends in mind. How is AI making new things in hardware possible, and possible at scale in particular?
You know, it's actually incredible. So machine learning, if you strip away all the hype, is about taking one kind of data and transferring it into another kind of data in a way that scales. And hardware itself provides the data. So if you have sensors, if you have like computer vision, you know, any of them that you add, what you have this great feedback loop and synergy between the data and the machine learning models. And the more sensors you add, the more data you get, and eventually what happens is you get this thing that works at scale, that actually upskills either human labor or human knowledge. And so a really good example of this is Blue River Technology. What they do is, for people who aren't familiar with them, is they take tractors, and instead of crop dusting a whole field, they put little tiny bits of fertilizer on little tiny bits of weeds and plants right as they come out of the ground. And if you were going to have humans do this, like it'd be hundreds of people and hundreds of hours of labor. You just wouldn't. You crop dust. And what AI allows you to do is it allows you to, you know, just remove all of that and go over a field in tiny individual precise little increments all at once.
So I'm familiar with another company doing something like this.
Yeah.
So I assume it's kind of the same. The tractor could be outfitted with, say, a camera, and the camera is feeding into an AI model in real time to use computer vision to differentiate, is this a weed and I want to do one thing to kill it? Is this a lettuce plant and I want to do something else to nurture it?
Yep, absolutely.
That sort of thing. Right.
But it's not just human labor, it's also human knowledge is the other thing that AI enhances. We were talking briefly, and you know what's harder to find than a software engineer in SF? It's actually a boiler operator in Ohio. I mean, as weird as that sounds, right? But what we've lost in this country is this middle skill knowledge base. You know, you either go to college, basically, or you don't. And right now, we're at historic unemployment across the United States, particularly in the Midwest. But in our economy, there are pockets of people that don't have access to it yet. You know, if you want to think about people coming out of prisons. And you can use AI to actually upskill those people and transfer that middle tier knowledge back down and lift everybody up.
So Ray, do you want to talk about what you were doing at Zimmergen, what you're doing now at Lexar?
Sure. I mean, maybe what I'll talk about is a little bit more on how healthcare uses AI and how hardware, the combination of AI hardware where it comes into healthcare. And there are some areas that I see are very, very interesting. It's a great time to be, at least on the healthcare side. One of them is the robots that are being used in hospitals. You know, you see the lowest end is robots being used to either deliver samples or linen to various rooms,
right,
all the way to robot-assisted surgeries. So that's one end. On the pharma side, both on the drug development side as well as the manufacturing side, there are two areas, and I'll touch on all these a little bit. And the third is where you have medical devices and mining the data that's coming out of medical devices and making it better for personalized care. So I can talk a little bit about the robots and the ones that are used in the hospitals. On the low end, you have the tug robots that can do 3 times as much work as a person in a hospital at 1/3 the cost.
Okay.
And then you have really interesting hardware interactions that all of us have seen in telemedicine, right? So patients can, either in the hospital or remotely at home, it's great for elder care, where they can interact with a physician or a specialist while sitting at home or at the bedside.
Right.
And
So there's like a video conferencing built into the robot, but there's also a presence of the physical.
Exactly. And at the end where the AI is very, very important is these robotic assisted surgeries, where you can have, like CorePath has a system where you can do surgeries where the patient's 20 miles away and a surgeon sitting in a room doing the surgery. Google just partnered with Johnson & Johnson to create a new company called Verve. And the 3 pillars that they're looking at is AI, hardware, and visualization. You know.
So maybe to dig in with one of those
Sure.
examples a little bit and talk about how AI plays in.
Sure.
And I don't know if this is the right one, but the one that intrigues me is the distance surgery. So if I'm a surgeon and you're my patient, right? And we should probably flip that around. So, but I'm 20 miles away, and it's more than just operating the robot with a joystick, so to speak, right? How does the AI become part of that loop?
So what you do is, obviously there's a lot of planning to be done. So the patient has to be, there's a 3D contouring done, you do CT scans of the patient, know exactly where the surgery needs to happen, the planning needs to happen, the surgeon is obviously very well prepared, and then the patient is somewhere else, and maybe the specialist is sitting in, say, New York, and the patient is in DC or Florida, and the specialist in New York has done this maybe 500 times, but there's a surgeon in Florida maybe hasn't done that many times, and you have the surgeon in New York guiding or at least assisting the surgery that's happening remotely. Right. And the AI part of it is every time you do this surgery, the system learns and can, for say knee replacements, you can put the replacement in a place where the tissue damage is not as much, the pain is a lot less, blood loss is a lot less.
Right. So that kind of, I don't know, just kind of by show of hands in the audience real quick, how many of you feel like you're familiar with AI on some level? So most folks, but not everybody. Okay. So one way that I've heard people talk about, it's kind of an easy way to break down, because AI is kind of this umbrella term. It's very buzzy right now, and it encompasses a lot of things: machine learning, deep learning, lots of different things. I think Danielle, the way you spoke about it at the beginning, is great. And a similar way to think about it is you've got what are called predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. And so predictive is when and this might have even come from the description you wrote up, Beth, I'm realizing. But predictive is when you're gathering data and you're putting it into the model, and the AI model is using it to help inform what's going to happen in the future. And prescriptive is when you're able to take that data and then kind of prescribe, what you should be doing. And so thinking about that and thinking about this role of hardware in both gathering information from sensors, cameras, and all manner of sensors, depending on the application, and then using that data and feeding it back in, Let's talk about the role of the AI in the network and hardware in network and thinking about a whole system. How is AI changing the role of hardware as it fits into kind of the big picture of a network, and how's that going to evolve in the next couple of years?
So I can talk about Zymergen. What Zymergen does is, look, they make various products for various clients, and what they do is they make specific genetic edits in a microbe. And to do that, you have to do tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of edits, and then it learns if it worked in some yeast for making some product. If the next product they're going to make is some similar, most likely these edits are going to be helpful. And then they work on 20 different hosts, so they learn from all the different hosts. So there's a lot of information. So within Zymergen, the company's about 700. About a third of them are data scientists.
Right.
So, and that's what they do. And the hardware piece is, as they're making the product, they have liquid handling robots. The robots learn when to do certain tasks or not, based on the host that they use.
So I'd like to jump in here too, because Zymergen does really precision AI. The other part of hardware is you can have loose AI, or you can have loose sensors. So, a lot of a dirty secret in hardware is sometimes our hardware is maybe not as optimal. There's a cost trade-off with it. And so AI works really well in a chaotic world, in a chaotic environment, and then can take in noise in the sensors that maybe you couldn't deal with before. Like you had classical, really brittle control methods, and so you had to have a certain quality of sensors. And don't get me wrong, the better quality of sensors you have is always better, but you have a lot more play in your hardware stack.
So for somebody, I'm thinking about your work at Femoro for a client, but for somebody in the audience who's thinking about working with hardware, obviously here in some capacity, but thinking about AI going forward, whether it's for a specific application or just kind of like, oh, well, everybody's using AI, I better use AI. What kinds of things, when related to hardware specifically, do we need to be thinking about when we're looking at designing a piece of hardware, designing a network, thinking about how the hardware is going to fit in? How is this, the power of AI kind of changing the way that you think about these things in the planning stages?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So hardware tends to be very slow. You have your prototypes, then and you just keep building them out. And it should be slow because you have a physical product. Software and AI is the inverse of that. It's so fast. There's hundreds of articles coming out every month and new papers and new research, and you turn around and it's different. Things that were hard 2 years ago are almost commoditized now. And so when you're building your hardware stack, build your hardware first. Get it out there. Make sure you plan so you can update your software on the fly as the software technology changes. Build the hardware, get it out, update the software.
Right. Again, going back to Zymergen, what Zymergen has done in the past is take a look at products that are made at large scales, hundreds of thousands of liters, sometimes tons, right? And then bring it down to a plate, a 96-well plate. So really, and make high throughput of the changes that they're making and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and what works, why it works, and if it doesn't work, what doesn't work. So to give you an example, there was a company that Zymergen, working with Fortune 100 company, was making a product at something like 100 tons, right? And the company had made 500 edits to their one host. And Zymergen went through the genome, looked at 15,000 different positions, took out all the edits that the company had done, and made only 15 precise edits, and then expanded back up. And then that product was almost 2.5 times than the product that the company was working on, right? Wow. So it learned what worked, what didn't work, yeah, and utilized that, and then give it back to the company.
Right. What are some of the pitfalls you've encountered that may be kind of general enough for folks to think about? I mean, obviously, Danielle, you mentioned start with the hardware, and plan for the software to be, updated fast and furious and on the fly. There are other things you've come across, again, whether in sort of designing hardware specifically or looking at the whole stack.
I think AI is very new, and it's outside of the comfort zone for a lot of people, even if they say that they're doing it. And so when I see a lot of AI companies, I actually wonder if they're really AI, or if they're mostly an engineering company that bolts on a little bit of AI. Because if you bolt on the AI, it falls off. It doesn't work. It won't be integral to your product, and you won't get the full benefits of it.
I'll talk about pitfalls. You can look at pharmaceutical R&D. Pharmaceutical R&D is, you look at tens of thousands of compounds and try to find one, right? And to find that one, you have to go through lots of testing. And oftentimes using, you can have the hardware which does the testing really well, but the AI part, which is supposed to predict what molecule can bind to a molecule that can potentially hit a cancer cell, that doesn't work. And so you go through a process, spend tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, and come to a clinical trial and have that fail.
Right. Ray, what's modular automation? We talked about this beforehand. I know it's a
Sure. On the pharmaceutical side, manufacturing, the pharmaceutical manufacturing is, the industry is very conservative, right? So they take a lot of time to make changes, and right now the industry spends about 10 times as much per FTE than other industries. So what's happening is automation is coming into the industry, which is great. And that's one thing. And the second thing is more of the therapies are becoming personalized. So if we talk about gene therapy or cell therapy, these therapies cost between $300,000 to $500,000 per patient, right? So now the pharmaceutical company does not need to make a plan to produce a pill for 10,000 or 1 million people. They need to make something for 10 people.
Right.
So what they need to do is have a platform, a platform that they can plug and produce. So they can take some things out for a certain drug, and then they might need to make another drug, they swap other things out.
Right.
And they can have the same system, like they need to take out blood cells and then put in one gene for one product and a different gene for another product. They swap out different things. So that's the modular aspect of the automation.
Right. And are there implications for that in other industries beyond pharma?
Yes, I mean, there are implications in the petrochemical industry. In fact, the Zymergen technology has been looked at by industries in the automotive space, the petrochemical space, chemical engineering space. So it's pretty broad.
Danielle, are there other similar, kind of big concepts or innovations that are kind of shaping the way, changing, whether it's changing from, building one thing at huge scale to then, reimagining that process for more customization, or just something else in, big concept in the hardware and AI marriage space that you think is going to inform things?
Yeah, I really keep coming back to the fact that it upscales human knowledge. One of the projects that I'm really excited about is this smart toothbrush. Right, I mean, raise your hand here if you hate going to the dentist. Yeah. And so what if you had a toothbrush that examined your teeth every time you brushed? And so you could catch caries before they turned into decay. So effectively, you would never have a cavity again. And that's a sort of like amazing, revolutionary, life-changing things that AI and hardware together, because you need the physical device, you have to have it, working, that it enables.
Right, right. I've heard, when I think about it, I have 2 little kids, and so the brushing their teeth as they went to the dentist recently, and the dentist was like, "You're doing great in the back, but you got to focus more on the front." I know there are Bluetooth toothbrushes that can sort of, in a very rough way, track, have you hit all the areas, and certainly did you brush for the full 2 minutes.
But what if you just put a camera on it?
Right, I put a camera on it, and you feed the data back into a CV system. And, all right, so if somebody wants to run, you guys can have that idea. I mean, that's your idea. Give it away. So we've talked about cameras a little bit, and there are sensors galore on a kind of an industry by industry basis. what are some of the specific features, if you can think of them, or if not, kind of broader trends that you think are going to be important on the hardware side in particular, again, in the next couple of 5 years or so? Ray?
So I can start. I mean, some of the cool products that are coming out, one of them just came out of MIT. It's called a robo drug. Basically, you take a drug, it looks like a leopard tortoise. You swallow it.
So like
A tortoise, it's a leopard tortoise. When it goes in, it can right itself.
Okay, yeah,
if
yeah.
you flip it over.
Right.
So you swallow it, goes to your stomach, flips over, then goes to a certain part of the stomach and injects. And they're doing it for insulin. A lot of people don't like injecting themselves, right?
Sure.
And the stomach lining doesn't have any pain receptors, so you can inject and people don't feel any pain.
Wow.
Things like that are awesome. There's another one, plaque buster, which is a small little hammer that you can put in the body and breaks up plaques.
Right, right. Danielle,
I'm just blown away.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
still sounds so cool.
Like I thought my toothbrush was cool. Are there how many folks in the audience are day-to-day involved in making hardware in some capacity, designing, building, prototyping? So Danielle, from your kind of, again, consultant perspective, trends that you're seeing, features that your clients or you wish were out there, or you can imagine, going forward?
Gosh.
That's a big question, I know.
I think right now, with this state of machine learning, because there's so much hype about it, and it is amazing, and the potential is huge, but it's also a lot dumber than you think, too. So,
How so?
so things that a human can do in a second are really good uses of AI. Things that complex decision trees, complex or long event horizons are much more difficult to do with AI. So if you're working in hardware, if you have an application that can be done in a photograph, that's great. The technology is really well developed for there, and there's so many unexplored avenues we can do just with adding vision. But if you go beyond vision, because vision is just one of our 5 senses, and you start thinking about other things we could do with sound, for hearing aids, or touch, then I think the possibility space just expands.
Yeah. Right?
So I'll add on to that. So there are robots out there that are nursing assistants, Cody system, that now can take a blood pressure or a temperature. But the plan is to add a telemedicine aspect to that. So not only do you take blood pressure or temperature or maybe even take blood and find out whether it's within the normal range or not. If not, then it sends a signal to someone, a nurse or a specialist. And then you can take it even further and have clinical decision support systems that can potentially, quote unquote, diagnose if things are totally aberrant.
Right.
And those sort of things are coming up quite a bit.
I want to leave time to turn it over to audience questions. Before we do, anything you want to say in closing, and or any plugs you want to make, places where if folks want to find out more about what Fomoro or Alexei are doing, they can go online to look?
Yeah, absolutely. Fomoro AI, we're based in San Francisco. We're happy to cut coffee with people and talk about their hardware projects. My email is danielle@fomoro.com.
Great.
Hit me up.
And at Luxi, it's a contract development research organization. We're focusing a lot on the modular automation part of it. So anyone who's interested in that, my email is ray.chaudhuri@luxi.net.
Great. All right. Before we get to questions, just a quick thank you round of applause for Danielle and Ray.
Oh, wait, we should do one for you, too.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
and for Lucas in absentia. Hopefully he makes it through the traffic. Questions about AI, machine learning, hardware?
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. I'll start. This is really great, and I really appreciate the breadth of the perspective. And Ray, you were clearly talking a lot about the B2B world in healthcare, and some with the B2C. That's really amazing that you could swallow a device that enables you to not have to have an injection or an angioplasty, right? So I'm wondering from the three of you, clearly we see a lot in the B2B side. You've given some great B2C examples. Where do you think the real movement is going to be in the next year, 3 years, 5 years?
On the B2B side in particular? Either, okay. Right. I don't have an answer, I just was following up.
Well, from the healthcare side, I think most of it is going to be on the B2B, even though a lot of the companies want to go to the B2C side. It's very hard, it's very expensive, at least on the healthcare side. So most likely the adoption is going to happen more on the business-to-business side. Some of the telemedicine aspects are happening, on the hospital front, and the hospitals are giving access to patients that the patients are interacting through the hospital. So it's more B2B and then maybe some B2C there.
There's actually, just because we're talking about healthcare, there's a gentleman I interviewed for the podcast, the episode's not out yet, who has a platform, I think it's called doc.ai, doc.ai, and it's smartphone based. And I think their ultimate goal is to kind of put healthcare data, patient data back in the patient's hands. And right now what they have is kind of a beta trial. You can sign up from your phone for clinical trials that take the health data that's harvested by your phone. So in my case, I have a watch that tracks my, steps and fitness and heart rate and stuff, and that syncs back to my phone. And then from my phone, I can sign up to make my data available. And they actually have a system where you can earn points and get gift cards. I haven't tried it. I'm not advertising or vouching for it. But it just made me think on sort of, between the cloud and the kind of personal network of sensors that can feed into, what's essentially a powerful computer in my phone, that's the first I've heard of kind of an AI-based thing coming from the phone on the B2C side. I wonder if in other verticals, similar things are going to take shape in the next couple of years.
There's a lot of interest. A lot of digital health companies are trying to push for it, direct to consumer. It's a lot harder because consumer adoption is, takes time and it's very expensive, right? So. Yeah.
Yes. So I got a bet writing on this. All right.
What's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Effectively none. Well, no, actually, I'm sorry. That's not exactly correct. All of my answers are, but yeah. AI is the broader space, and machine learning is kind of a subset of that, if that answers your question.
And do you also think of deep learning as another subset?
It's an even smaller subset of machine learning. So if you have, AI,
right.
Machine learning, deep learning.
And how do you, to put you on the spot here, get you a professor cap, how do you differentiate between the circles?
Sure. So AI can have a lot of different components. Often machine learning, we're talking about narrow AI. So we're talking about, like I said, transferring one kind of data into a different kind of data. We're not talking necessarily about general intelligence, which is a whole different piece of the AI puzzle. And from there, you can have a lot of different algorithms that are machine learning. They learn from data, they improve, but aren't like deep neural network layers. And so that's where you get into the deep learning.
Right. Yes.
All right, so as AI is making hardware sexy again, what happens when that hardware gets sexier than the boiler operator and all those middle sort of knowledge base? And what does that mean for those people and their sense of meaning?
Yeah, so
it's good. I like landing on the philosophical.
Yeah, no, I think a lot about this. This is a great question. First of all, that boiler operator doesn't exist. That's a unicorn and a myth. We have lost this middle tier skill set in our country, and it's just not coming back. You know, people aren't going to trade shows, and high schools aren't incentivized to send people to trade schools. They get judged on how many people they send to college. So we have a lot of people that have gone through college and are now high skilled. But we also have this pool of labor in the economy that was cut out of it, basically, that they don't have access. Maybe they went to prison, maybe something else happened in their life. And if I can take them and I can turn them into a middle skill tier person, that's a good life. That opens up a wide range of possibilities that wasn't accessible before.
Do we have time, or are we at time? One more? Okay.
Yeah, just coming back to the theme. Whereas basically, my question is, where is the AI happening? Where is happening in the cloud or in the? Do you see like AI happening in the cloud or it's in the hardware? I think there are more like tensor like hardware that it is specialized hardware where you deploy your AI models there, so that you don't need to connect your hardware to the network, so that it does like that. Where do you see like trends where, because there are like hardware, specialized hardware like Coral for Google, and a while ago there was this yeah, specialized hardware that where you deploy these AI models.
So I'm on the business side, so I know enough to be dangerous. So when I was talking to the Zymergen modular automation people, they said, well, what we do is actually fog computing. I never heard the term before. So it's fog computing happens pretty close to, you know, where the machines, the liquid handling robots are happening. And then they send it up to a cloud as needed, but it happens pretty close to where the machines are.
Yeah, I know with NVIDIA, you know, they refer to AI at the edge. And so they have a line of system-on-a chips for embedded computing that can handle, they can't handle what the cloud, you know, the data center behemoth machines can do, but they can do processing at the edge for some reason traffic lights are popping into my head, but you know, if you have a traffic control system, a smart camera mounted to a traffic light, it can handle some of the actual sort of predictive decision making right there, and then, you know, feed the data back, and that's useful in, you know, when you get into situations where you don't have good network connectivity at the edge, or if it's in a device that's meant to be autonomous and mobile and that sort of thing.
Yeah, actually, to jump on to what Ray and Noah have said, the AI is happening everywhere. It's ubiquitous. There is no like only on the cloud or only on the edge. It's in everything you have, and it's just going to be more and more. It'll be more ubiquitous than cell phones.
All right. Well, thank you all again for coming, and thanks to Danielle and Ray for all of your insight. And we'll throw it back to Beth.
Thanking Noah, Danielle, and Ray for this great panel on how AI is making hardware sexy again. So we're going to actually take